Here we go.
Said one time the sky window.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. I would like to call the November 6th Addison Central School District Board meeting to order. The current time is 6:30. First, at this time, I had thought I would propose adding an agenda item per open meeting law. But Suzanne pointed out that we have a policy 820 that doesn't allow something to be added at this point in time. Unfortunately, that agenda item got dropped in the agenda, and I didn't notice it until last night when I was prepping. So I guess at this point, we will do that the following meeting as well. So we'll warn it properly when we have the meeting on the 27th. Next, I would like to have introductions. So let's start with Brian.
Sure. Brian Bauer.
Lindsay Hescott.
Jamie McCallum.
Mary Heather Noble.
Steve Orzek.
Suzanne Buck.
Chip Malcolm.
Ellie Round. Joanna Dorian.
Barbara Wilson.
Nicole Carter.
Trisha Allen.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
And on Zoom,
Jason Chance.
and then in the room.
Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning. Emily Flestein, Director of Communication.
Excellent, thank you. And at this time, it's our moment to invite public comment on agenda items only. For those who would like to speak on other items, we'll have another agenda item later in the meeting. If you're interested in making a public comment on the agenda, please raise your hand. If you're participating online, raise your Zoom hand. And as the policy that we've been following, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. So first, we'll start in the room. Is there anyone that wants to make a public comment? Okay, Mary.
Hi, Mary Slozar from Waybridge. I wanted to comment on the updated strategic plan input that the ad hoc committee presented to the board today. First, I want to just congratulate and thank you all for taking that courageous step. I know it wasn't easy to take that on, particularly when you're so bogged down with the superintendent search, but I think it was a real pleasure to watch you all dig in and discuss things. A couple of comments in case it's helpful to your discussion tonight as you're working through things with the team. One on goal 2 related to access. It just was striking to me that while the targets, the goal and the targets all correspond to resource allocation and student needs, the strategies only focus on resource allocation and don't call out student needs, which feels like a missing piece from where I sit. And then goal 3 related to success. The ad hoc committee came up with some really ambitious targets that seem great and exciting. But I was surprised to not see those ambitious targets met with strategies that would support them in the strategy section. Identifying barriers, building systems for culturally responsive practices, and providing multiple pathways doesn't seem like it would get us to increasing our math and literacy proficiency to what the target says. So I would just encourage this board to consider what kinds of things you would like our administration to focus on. 2 areas that come to mind for me are developing, really embracing teaching strategies based on evidence-based practices and universally designed learning, which is something the district's working on already, but it's great to have that as something they know they need to report to you on, and developing systems for early identification and intervention in math and literacy. That's related to our MTSS system, but clearly something needed if we're going to hit those targets. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll continue. So next is not approving the minutes, but approving the ACSD bills, and I'll turn it over to Chip.
The bills were read on the 30th of October, the only time since our last meeting. The first is the general fund for $754,425.39. Of that amount, two big ones. One was to student transportation, 270, these are round numbers, 278,000, and another payment to Breadloaf, 267,000. So quite a large piece of that 700,000 were these two payments. And the second is a payroll warrant for $934,334.41. I move that we accept and pay the bills.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Questions? Go ahead.
Are we expecting many more bills from Breadloaf for that kitchen project? Do we know?
I have no idea.
It's a facilities question.
Jason, do you know if we're expecting any more bills from Breadloaf for the kitchen project?
We have, I think there is still some outstanding invoices. We are, I think, when I saw the report in the last review, 182,000, somewhere in that ballpark, short of what was anticipated, and they were pretty much anticipating using the entire amount, so.
Thanks.
Sometimes there's checklists and all that goes on.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the bills indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the bills have been approved. On the agenda next, we have a facility staff appointments action, and I'm going to turn that over to Nicole.
Hi, everybody. So we're bringing before you the appointment of Kristen Lang as a paraprofessional 1.0 FTE.
I will make a motion.
Okay.
To appoint Kristen Lang as a paraprofessional 1.0 FTE, step 1 per the ESP master agreement.
Second.
Any discussion? Questions? Everyone's quiet. Okay. So, ready for the questions. So all those in favor of approving the appointment of Kristen Lang as a paraprofessional of 1.0 FTE per the ESP master agreement indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, she's been appointed. And I think you had a staffing update as
Yeah.
well.
Tim had hoped to be here to share that the district will post a position for a kindergarten teacher for Mary Hogan tomorrow.
Any questions? I have questions.
When will that, wait, I'm sorry, say that one more time, Nicole? Okay,
The district will post a position to hire a
Post one,
kindergarten
okay.
teacher.
okay,
for
great,
Mary Hogan.
thank you.
Questions? And Mary, Heather, you had your hand up before.
I did, but I have absolutely, go ahead. Somebody
Okay,
else-
great.
I'm sure somebody else has the same question.
Okay, so Steve,
Is this a replacement for a position? Is this a new position? Is this a staff member that is resigning?
It is a new position with funding that was found within the Mary Hogan budget that can be reallocated. I believe, I wish Matt was here, I believe the funds were found in a general education fund that we hadn't used for a couple of years.
I guess the heart of the question is, a new kindergarten is being formed over there to split the existing students into an additional class.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joanna.
I just want to get the full context. In the last couple of meetings, we've approved, I think it looks like 5. Either there's a move from MUMS or another district-wide to a building-based position. So that's 2, and then 3 more full 1.0 FTE, and then potentially a new kindergarten. Just to have the full context. Am I missing anything?
Tell me again what the first one is you're saying?
There was a move from the a district-wide, maybe the rural schools to Mary Hogan. This is what Jen Kravitz wrote in an email updating.
Marissa Hennings is a behavior specialist who's part of the behavior team for the rural schools, who's been temporarily reassigned, and we reassess it monthly.
Okay, I guess I didn't get the temporary
Yeah.
note in that.
Yeah,
And then there is an admin move from Mums to Mary Hogan. I don't want to say, I mean, Joyce.
Yeah.
and
MUHS.
I
I
don't
thought it
think,
was Mums, Mike
Mike
is now
Dudek
building
is the
lead.
student response coordinator, not connected with MOMS or NUHS, but it was a district position that's ESSER funded,
But he's
and he's
now
been-
based.
temporarily relocated to Mary Hogan.
Okay. And then three new 1.0 positions, 2 paras and a building lead.
I believe those para-education positions are not brand new, they're filled though.
Okay, so they were vacant.
Yeah.
It looks like you have the same, you were,
Slightly different question, but
and then potentially. a new.
Yes, that's the only
Am
one
I
that
missing any?
I think so.
Can we just reiterate, I'm sorry to jump in, can we just reiterate that to get that accounting correct? Do you
Sure.
mind?
She's trying to take notes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I believe Joanna was asking and I responded that Marissa Hennings, who's a behavior specialist for the rural schools, was temporarily relocated to Mary Hogan. And we reassess that monthly. That Mike Dudek, the student response coordinator, which is an ESSER funded position, was temporarily relocated to Mary Hogan.
and both of those are district,
Those are both-
central office or student service.
Both student service and both centralized positions. I believe Mary Hogan entered the year, this is the part that I'm not sure about, with 5 vacancies for paraeducators. I believe 2 or 3 of them have been filled to date. And then the addition of a kindergarten position for Mary Hogan.
So to be clear, one position has been added to Mary Hogan.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Tricia.
the kindergarten position, is this for the remainder of this school year and then not planning on being renewed? Or is this a new moving forward position?
That's a great question that I can and can't answer.
Okay.
The part I can answer is anyone in the district who's hired after June 1st is on a 1-year contract. So it would be that contract would end, whether or not it will be part of the budget for next year, I do not know.
Okay, Ellen.
How many sections of kindergarten would this create?
5. There's 72 students total, which is the largest since 2001.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And moving forward, we have the ad hoc strategic committee, I can't even talk today, ad hoc strategic committee readout and recommendations. And at this time, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Jason, who's offered to do the readout of the materials that you have in your board pack.
All right, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent, great. I do not plan to read these to you because I'm sure everyone has reviewed them ahead of time. I will go over the highlights and then hopefully we will spark some lively discussion around our strategic plan and next steps. So the ad hoc committee met 3 times for an hour and a half each, and it was charged with reviewing the strategic plan and incorporating all of your feedback into suggestions. We submit this presentation as our report to summarize our suggestions, and then we leave it to the board to decide next steps and which suggestions to move forward with and which to change. So the focus of our work was mainly around clarifying existing goals and specifying targets for those goals. And that work had already begun for goal number 3, but was not, goals 1 and 2 were not touched. We also set about reviewing the strategy statements for each goal to make sure they supported the goals and the targets that we identified. We also reviewed the action steps that were part of the strategic document to validate whether they were appropriate and or should be included going forward. These are the members of the committee. Not super excited. Sorry, is there a question?
No.
Okay, so the recommendations basically boil down into 3 groups. We have outlined several targets that we, in cooperation with Nicole and Emily, crafted that we believe are specific and appropriate, although aspirational. We reworked some of the language around the strategies, and then we have some proposed changes around the structure and outline of the document. One of the main ones being that the action steps that have been in the strategy document should be basically relabeled and put into its own section called proposed or suggested action steps, and have it be clear that those action steps are the work of the action team and not mandates coming down from the school board. Questions about that? Great. So let's jump into goal number 1, belonging, everyone feeling safe, welcome, included in our schools in the district. Students and families will be able to engage with the school system in valuable ways. So we identified 5 targets, all of them new. And I'm not going to read them to you, but anyway, I'll let you review them and then ask questions about these targets. If any other committee members want to jump in and offer context or anything about these particular targets, go for it.
Yep.
I
Sorry, I
have a
didn't see.
question about number 1, 100%. 100% is aspirational, obviously, but in the past, there have been situations where children in one school, and because of many different issues, ended up in another school in order to be, hopefully succeed. So I don't know whether that includes that type of a situation or not, but I just am always a little suspicious of 100% goal, since in fact that's always fluid. So I hate to have something that's, I don't disagree with the statement, it's just the 100% that I have a problem with.
Yeah, we struggled with this a little bit. We had said, well, what if we use 90%? And then we're saying, you're basically saying like, okay, so our goal is to have 10% of student staff and families not feel safe, welcome, or included in our schools. And that just didn't seem to sit right with us. So that's why we landed on 100%.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Tricia and then Ellen.
I was just gonna say, I think the same thing, that Chip, yes, 100% is an almost impossible goal. However, it's anything less is not something that we should settle for, right? Like it is, we are not okay with even 99% would mean that there are 3 or 4 kids in the school who are feeling like not safe, not belonging, and that's not okay. And so I had the same like, oh, 100%. Oh, I see, 100%. So yes, realistically, I don't know that we will have success in reaching 100%, but I think the point is that we are committing to striving towards that and continuing to try to get to that point.
Thank you. Ellen?
Yeah, I would say, I think that all of the targets that have percentages attached to them are quite ambitious, if not by definition aspirational. And like Jason said, we sort of wrestled with that at every juncture. Everything Trisha just said, for sure. And also something that Nicole brought up that really stayed with me was that part of the work of the implementation team would need to be figuring out, when we're not at 100%, what are we doing to focus on the 5 or 10 or 15% of kids and families who say that they don't feel safe. So that built into a goal like this is inherently improvement and hopefully creativity and evolution in trying to reach it. But yes, the high percentages sort of beg certain questions about, do we hold ourselves accountable to always striving to reach them? Or do we let ourselves off the hook for not reaching them because we acknowledge that they may not feel possible? And I think that's something that we'll have to continue to engage with, particularly as we're looking at, in the next year or so, implementation plans.
And Suzanne?
So under the targets, under 2 and 3, the term is valuable family engagement, but I'm not sure what exactly that might look like. And then the other piece that I wonder is your targets, you have 100% on the first one. And then when you get down to 4, well, actually, most of them, you don't put any targets, and, especially 5 says reduction in the number of incidents. But there's absolutely no target there, which to me it just seemed a little bit odd that we have one target and then others that look like they should have targets that aren't there. But I really struggled with what valuable family engagement means. Like, is it that all families show up at parent-teacher conferences and concerts and things, or is it more than that? I'm just wondering.
Okay, would anyone like to take that? Mary Heather?
I mean, I guess we talked about that a little bit as well, and, trying to put something in there that will signal to the implementation team the kind of things that they should be paying attention to, whether it's attendance of these things, or whether people are coming to open house, or whether, parents are reaching out and knowing where to go when they have questions about things. I think it's kind of it varies depending on the family, right? So I think the idea is that we have families who feel like they know where to go and their voices are heard and are participating at the level that they feel comfortable. And obviously, we're thinking of those families in particular who don't usually show up. So those are the ones that, we're kind of hoping to have some diversity in, or at least, maybe I'm speaking just for myself and not the whole committee, but, having some diversity in the participants who are coming to our school events and not just the same, families whose parents have time to come and the means to show up, but that, families who we haven't normally seen show up are starting to show up. How we measure that and, how we really get a handle on that, I think that's the work of the implementation team. But, yeah.
Go ahead,
That's
Ellen.
what I would say. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, I think it was intended to be interpreted.
Yeah.
But also to be interpreted in a way that's meant, I think what you're saying, or what I hear and what you're saying, Mary Heather, it's like flexibility and acknowledgement that family engagement shouldn't just be joining parent groups, and it shouldn't just be one thing, and it has to be more tailored to families. And then I would say improvement and reduction are targets. We didn't attach numbers to every target, but going from something to higher and going from something to lower, I think those do still meet the mark of that would be the target that we're aiming for, but also in some cases not attaching a certain number or percentage goal.
Right, and I'm sorry to just follow up on Helen's point. This kind of implies that the implementation team therefore has to do kind of an assessment of where are we at with these issues or items? Where are we at with the number of incidents? Where are we at with family engagement? So there does kind of require some element of self-assessment on all these things. Front.
Okay, Joanna.
That's exactly what I was gonna ask about when I read number 3, barriers have been identified. So is that not happening in this phase, but that is the task for the implementation team? So this strategic plan won't have a gauge of where we're at to then meet any.
It's not the board's work to do that. The board.
To ask this
is-
group
I mean,
together to.
Exactly, I mean, really, and I think this is what we had to kind of revisit again and again as a committee is our work as the board is to articulate our dream destination in the best way that we can, in the most descriptive way that we can, so that the implementation team can then say, okay, now I can figure out how to get you there. But it's not the board's role to say, here's what we want to measure, here's how fast we want to get there, here's how the tools that we're going to use to drive us there. That's not the board's role, that's the administration's role, that's the implementation team's role.
So I guess it sets the next foothold pretty clearly, because then it's like, okay, then
That's
that's
the
the
goal.
identification and then.
And I think there's a lot we don't know.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
There's a lot of work to fully identifying the barriers, or at least for the board to understand it enough. So lots of.
Excellent. Any more comments, questions? Steve?
I was reading through the document and I kept running across traditionally and historically marginalized and didn't see anywhere in here where we specifically define what that is. I mean, civil rights law is very specific about what are categories that are discriminated against and what ones are not.
Right.
And we have had discussions here that have broadened that definition. And I find it particularly uncomfortable to now engage in a strategic plan that isn't specific when addressing something like traditionally and historically experienced marginalization. I know it's awkward to say race, color, national origin, disability, but is there some place in the document where we could define that and then
Yes.
use a term and
Yes.
say marginalized groups, which includes race, color, national origin, disability, sex.
Yep.
So I think because anybody could read this document and say, well, we're traditionally marginalized, and I think we need to be very clear about what we mean, because the whole point of this was for equity, and it seems to dilute that a little bit by not specifying.
Yeah,
Okay.
and before I call on Mary Heather, what this information, once the board approves the information, right, based on whatever the final state of it is, will then go into the document. This is really just the input that will go into the strategic plan document that's already been drafted. So at this time, we haven't asked Emily to update the document because we wanted to have this discussion first, right? So included in the document, there is a section on definitions, and we can definitely look to make sure that.
We talked about adding that
Yeah.
definition
Yeah, we did.
and trying to use standard language. So if there's not standard language, then there should be, and we had talked about adding that into the glossary.
Yes, so that's important to have, you're absolutely right, that's important to have in the document. But we didn't try, in this report, we didn't replace it, repeat everything that's in the report itself. And Mary Heather.
What I was going to suggest, though, what we did talk about is, yes, we do need to define it. And one of the ways that we were talking about in committee is similar to the way that the state defines it per their equity work, which includes not only your race-based and identity-based, but also socioeconomically
And disability.
And
and disability. So it's based on Vermont's definition, and so it's grounded in that, which obviously helps us with data reporting and consistency. So I guess think of that as every time you see that historically, that it will be defined.
And I had another observation, if I may.
Sure.
Under goal 2 access strategy number 3, hire staff with diverse identities who are onboarded, coached, and mentored.
We're not there yet.
We're not there
I'm
yet,
sorry.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, I thought-
We're still
talking
talking about
the
one.
whole-
Yeah, sorry.
Got it.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Any other observations, questions, comments on our targets for goal number 1?
I just have a quick clarification, and I should know this because I was on the committee, but I forget. If, actually, can you go back a slide there? Okay, under the targets, proposed targets, is that an area that the implementation team will be adding and changing as well, or are the targets what we set gonna stay as we work them?
So repeat that again, I didn't follow.
I think the targets are set.
Yeah, we set
We're
the
setting
target.
targets, and they're not gonna be reworked or added or changed by the implementation
No.
team.
Correct.
No, that'll be in our, we'll get, as we get further in the slide deck, we have recommendations, as Jason had alluded to, the structure of the document. So the first section is the work of the board. Do you have a question?
Yes,
Joanna?
not to belabor this point, but does it seem odd, I mean, to Suzanne's point, that 100% is used, no other percentages? I mean, could we say all, just to align those, all of our students now? Well, it just calls out that, is that highlighted? I mean, I trust the process, but.
It's
It's a
part
valid
of my
question.
It's a
question
valid-
originally.
yeah.
It's a valid
I mean,
question.
100%
I think it's
all.
just that we started at 90 and we're like, no, it should be 100.
Yes,
but
exactly.
It should be all, yeah.
I mean, I personally think it's reasonable to change 100% to all.
If there were percentages in the other ones, I think it would make more sense.
Hmm.
I mean, I think about how we're gonna use this in the future, right? And we're gonna look at these, and we want a similar assessment lens to the targets.
So what do folks feel about that? I mean, would they rather see all instead of 100%? Is that kind of the general sense?
I would.
I would as well.
Okay, I think
Seems
that's
reasonable.
easy to do. We can change that. Any other comments on proposed targets for goal number 1? If not, let's move to the next slide.
Okay, the next slide, are reworking and, actually, strategy 1 was untouched. We worked on the wording for strategy 2 and 3 and added strategy 4. So, thoughts on these?
And Barb, if I may,
Yes.
I just want to reiterate, these are the strategies that would be in service of meeting the targets defined in goal 1. So think of that as you're looking at them.
Right.
That's helpful.
And
It's tiered, right? You have the
Yeah.
goal,
Right, yeah,
you have
yeah.
the targets, and then next is really those strategies or priorities, other districts use that term, that the board is setting.
And this is the section that we put some wording in, but isn't actually something that
This will
we're,
be in our section.
this is in our section too.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I was confused when we were talking about this. I thought that the implementation team would be able to develop some strategies as well. They're not, they're just working on.
It's the
part.
action
It's the
steps.
action
It's
steps.
that.
I know, the terminology, yeah.
And Chip, thank you.
Could you explain a little more that strategy number 3 we reworded and put it into an example of some kind, I guess?
Do you want to take that, Jason? Or did you hear the question, or you want me or one of us?
Yeah, so this was one of the strategies that the action team came up with. And the only change we made was to include families in that, so that families that have been, historically marginalized, their input is taken into account when making large decisions and doing district-wide planning.
But
I have an idea about how it might be put into action.
could you,
But I mean, this is
I need to
brainstorming.
see that a little bit. I
I
just
am-
don't understand it other than this sort of statement.
I imagine that, and Emily, correct me if I'm wrong here, or Nicole, who are part of this, but I imagine that part of it's coming from the process by which this plan was even developed, right? So there was real intention and new and renewed and more effort put into making sure that people who have not necessarily been part of conversations are at the center of leading those conversations and are very much incorporated. So I sort of was thinking, as I was reading through it, when you're talking about decision-making or planning, related to, and as what I'm thinking again about from an implementation team standpoint, if we're coming up with a new way that we're going to start engaging parents, and the objective is to make sure that parents who speak any language at all are able to understand and receive information and know, like Mary Heather was saying, like know exactly where to go to connect with their kids' teachers or the principals in their schools, then to help design what that system looks like, you would reach out to parents who are non-English speaking to say, what would be your experience of how this might work best for you, so that it's not just coming up from on high, but trying to redirect some of the decision making. I'm just thinking out loud, but that's my understanding of how this was originally developed. And like Jason said, we wanted families included in it, but this was not one that we talked as extensively about, I think, as a committee.
Plus families are in the goal statement.
Right.
Go ahead, Mary.
I think the other way that I have looked at it is making sure that the board is communicating to its administration that we want you to check your blind spots and look for the things that we're not normally looking for. Look to make sure that the families who aren't, showing up on their own volition are still being considered and invited and encouraged to come. I guess that's, and looking at it from, just in terms of access, making sure that opportunities are provided so that everybody can get there, not just people who are well-resourced, yeah. And again, language is another example. I know, like, one of the things that Emily mentioned when we were discussing was even when we had the advisory committee come together for the very, very beginning of this process and offering a stipend for folks so that people who normally would have to pay for transportation or childcare are now also invited, and it's an opportunity for them that they might otherwise not have taken. So it's just really kind of checking blind spots, I guess. And this is just a more formal way of describing that, I guess.
And this is under the goal of belonging.
Yes.
Okay, because it expand this in a way that it will become a little more different, okay?
And Suzanne?
So under the same one, strategy 4, develop policies and procedures to prevent and address identity-based harassment. We already have policies, so I'm confused. It sounds like, I don't know, to me when I read it, it sounded like we didn't have any policies, but we do have policies. So I wasn't really sure why we were adding that when we do currently have policies.
We have policies to address, we don't have policies to prevent.
Right.
I would also argue our policies need some bolstering. That was a major takeaway from me when Nicole presented that to us, that the policies we have are limiting what staff can do. So we probably need to look at that again.
Looking around, Steve?
I mean, on the strategy 4, I think that would give us a little bit of, I don't know, impetus, cover, whatever you want to call it, to start addressing some of the things that, we talk about bringing families into the school, but we also need to do some things about reaching out to families around racism, especially students that are perpetuating harassment and bullying, and that prevention portion might be a good place to start talking to people who are sending their kids to school that are doing this, rather than just focusing, yes, we should be focusing on the kid, but as you said before, parents and community need to be involved in this. And we don't currently, as we learned last time, don't currently do anything when a student is engaged in some kind of harassment or bullying. We do not do anything to reach out to the parents educationally or in other ways. So.
And a strategy like this has a board component, which is the develop policies. So it really kind of gives us an opportunity, or would give us an opportunity to take a much more in-depth look at it and maybe even have some expertise work with us on what would be better. That was the thought process behind this one. So that procedures could then be developed that are more preventative and not just reactive. Any other comments on the strategies associated with goal 1 under belonging? Okay, moving on. I'll let you go to the next slide, Jason.
Thanks. So goal 2 was around access, and we proposed 5 new targets around access. Any questions or comments?
Any questions? Comments?
I just have a,
Go ahead, Chip.
I'm sorry, the student needs across the district, I'm thinking in terms of needs, let's say the child's in a very small class in a small school, and they have basically no peers. And how do we address, that's a need for a lot of students. And that's honestly one side of the issue of small schools versus schools where there's a greater amount of possibility of finding your group or your peers. So I mean, it's an issue that I've never, I don't know how we address that. That's a kind of a, to me, that's an access issue. If you have no peers or no other kids in the class of your same gender, or I experienced that in my own family, and so I just sensitive to it as being an issue.
Barb?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's something, Chip, we talked a lot about sort of, because something I read in this goal was a real focus on understanding students' needs. And Nicole and Emily were sort of sharing with us the ways that the district does collect a lot of data and sort of synthesize that data to have more of that comprehensive understanding that I think we as a board don't always have. And I think the word need can mean a lot of things. And so what I would expect to come from something like this from the implementation team would be an explanation and regular reporting of this is our understanding of the needs of our students, right? On many different levels, whether it's behavioral, whether it's social emotional, academic, social needs. And then here's how we are not meeting them. And so that could be a component of it. If it's like showing up and saying research shows X, Y, and Z, this is a need that our students have, but we're not meeting it in these locations. So we need to think about how our resources are allocated to make sure that those needs. So I think what you're saying could be covered in that. And that's why
I'm not saying it's not covered. I'm just pointing out it's always not a need that a child is disabled and isn't getting services.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, school choice can come into these kinds of issues at times when you're trying to deal with needs, especially in small populations. So I'm not advocating that either at this point, but I'm just saying that idea of need is very broad, and it's not always just something that we can easily point to as to what that child's need may be.
Just really that target 1, why it's even there, because we really need to understand it more so. Yes, Lindsay.
That number 2, I had reacted to similarly. I think the phrasing of, there's demonstrated alignment between what students need and experience at school is really opaque. It's like need is who, I guess at some point is that a living definition of need, who's saying, what if, someone at Mary Hogan needs to be in a smaller classroom, like that, there's so many different ways that can be interpreted, or somebody needs after school programs because their parent works and they'll be unsupervised for 3 hours, but that's not during the school day. but they can only not do it because of transportation to Ripton or so, you know, I mean, it opens up a can of worms, so. Earlier Steve mentioned about, defining very clearly, not as a footnote, you know, I agree with defining that historically marginalized student populations, especially if more resources are going to be diverted to those students. And if they're self-identifying or like where, you know, how are you confirming that, you know, that student falls under that definition? That, you know, the DOE does define that, but you see it in slightly different wording. But I know it would be the implementation team who defines what the needs are, but I know some families, they say, you know, my student needs more help with math, but to get that help with math it's really hard to do. If just a parent saying my student needs this isn't enough to get it. So I agree with what Chip is saying about that. If a parent just says, this is what I need, okay, so give us resources to do this. Who defines it specifically?
And looking back at target 1, that's really the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the needs are really defined based on target 1.
Goal 2. Okay.
Data sources, that one.
Comprehensive data sources
Right
are
here,
used to
comprehensive data
identify
sources.
and understand the students. And then once you have those, then you can look at target 2. But they're related.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess, and then, so would the implementation team be like making the decision on which data sources are being used for that? You know, if somebody's tested at the end of, you know, grade 3 and there was a new system implemented, and so you can't just use that one data source to decide what the needs are. So is that what the implementation team will do? We'll be providing like a list of the data sources and
The implementation team is responsible for the how.
the how, okay.
Because they are the expertise, you know, they have the expertise and resources to understand what the hows can be, whereas we don't have that and would be hard pressed to even come close.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it's just, yeah.
Go ahead, Mary Heather.
I think, Lindsay, you bring up an important point, and I think what the committee was trying to say to kind of address that concern is that we want multiple data sources, looking at multiple types of student need. So, you know, academic need, in several different sort of disciplines, behavioral need, social emotional need, all these sort of different things. And there already are data being collected by the district to sort of describe and quantify this. And so certainly, you know, they're the ones who have more expertise about, you know, defining and measuring these things. But what we're saying as a board is we don't want to just look at student need just narrowly, like just academically. We want comprehensive understanding of student need and also data from multiple sources so that we have as close to a 3D picture of what our district student need is. So that when we're looking at, you know, how that's addressed across the district, where we have a pretty clear picture. We're not gonna, as a board, we're not the ones defining that, the implementation team is, but we're telling the implementation team, we want some good information on this, and we need some baseline information on it as well.
So would we have a budget then if we had to invest in new data sourcing, or these are already existing, or
So,
like, yeah?
yeah, so it, you know, obviously things need to be paid for. And so the implementation team can propose to us, this is, you know, things I can do here, and here's the costs associated with that. And then through the budgeting process, we have to make, you know, decisions.
Mhm.
are we gonna put our money in that area? So, that will be an important part of this, is ensuring that the budget gets allocated to the things it needs to. And where can we allocate it, based on limited budget resources. So this doesn't eliminate that need, as we need to do today, right, is to really make sure that there's priorities around the budgeting. Go ahead, Ellen.
I think the other thing that you're bringing up, Lindsay, that's an important piece that we talked about was the word choice in the targets, which is really important to engage with, is our sort of mechanism for being able to ensure that what we think is essential as a board is happening without over prescribing the how of it. So that's where I think comprehensive was a word that we chose, because we get to decide as a board if we agree that the implementation team's actions hit the target of being a comprehensive data picture, right? And so if we had just said data sources are used, and you don't include some guidance around a definition of what would feel complete, then you can kind of check that target a little bit easier. So that we did try to, and not that we nailed it in every single one, but we did try to include language that allows us as a board to engage with the how, not to prescribe it right now, but to sort of determine at the end of it, when there's an implementation team's action steps that are moving forward, do we think that this meets the targets of what we want to see?
So did you do that same thing with like major resource allocation?
Yep.
So that there's flexibility, like.
Right, because I think at some point it was like, I think originally this was resource allocation decisions, and then it was like, well, we don't want all resource allocation decisions, right? So you sort of throw in, granted, not a perfectly definitive term in major, but it's sort of meant to indicate a certain category as opposed to all, or, minor.
Will we define that, like what, is major, like $10,000 and above, or $100,000 and above, like?
I don't think that we would define it at this stage, but I think when the implementation team says, here's what we're doing to meet this target, it would be the board's work to decide, to sort of agree, yep, that feels like it's the right level.
Okay.
Mary Heather.
Well, and I was just gonna say, I mean, some resource decisions require board approval, and some are just fall under the guise of operations, and so that's another consideration.
And then there's always the budget approval process is the ultimate.
Which falls on us.
Yes, which falls on us. Okay, thank you. Good questions. Any other comments under the proposed targets? Questions, feedback? Okay, seeing none, let's move to the next slide.
Great, so the next piece is the strategies associated with goal 2. We left the first 2 untouched and added strategy 3 and strategy 4.
Okay.
Now it's time.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, let's see. Target 5, strategy 3, that deal with hiring new staff. I don't know, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but I don't know that there is a understanding of what this will take. Peter Burrows and I, not as part of any charge, we're working on trying to recruit teachers from historically black colleges. And it involved visits to Morehouse, Spelman, Howard, not at the district's expense, and discussions with teachers of color. And the universal thing was, nobody's going to come to Vermont unless there's a community in Vermont, and a community won't form without some people coming here. And there are a few people who will come up here without that need for community, but it is really hard to find them. And I applaud these goals. I think they're great. I wish we could have been more successful. But talking with a keynote speaker at the conference, he said, it's going to take a long time, years, to build relationships with these institutions, especially in a state that has as wide of a reputation as Vermont does. And that I mean, my experience has been with African American, but I think that applies with Hispanic and other teachers of color. They don't see a community here, they don't see one forming, and they're not interested in being pioneers, especially given some of the incidents that have happened recently. Not just here in this district, but places like Maine and Vermont. I think this is a really noble and again, I think of it like the 100%. This is aspirational almost. The amount of resources that would be required to make that happen, I don't know how we would do that. And it's very discouraging. Like I said, I've been trying to do this for 4 years now, and it's very discouraging. So.
Thank you, Steve. Ellen?
I think that presupposes that we don't have people living in Vermont with diverse identities. We do. A huge part of this is coaching and mentoring. We have very aspirational goals, including 100% of our students and family feel a sense of belonging. I don't know why we would touch this.
Mary, Heather?
I agree with both of you. It is hard. It is hard, and but I think it's important. We do have students of color, and I think we ought to be trying to recruit folks who represent our student body, and that student body is changing. And there are people in our communities now who would be excellent providers of teaching instruction to our kids. So I guess I don't feel that the difficulty of it justifies removing it.
I wasn't suggesting removing it if anyone is
Okay.
under that.
And that was why we made sure that the target 5 included not only attracting, but also retaining. Because that retention, you have to really think through that, I believe, before you actually do the hiring. Great. Any other
Lindsay
comments?
has her.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lindsay?
I think it's important to have number strategy 3 within this document. Some might say that we do have diverse identities. People define themselves in many different ways. And it can be really hard to recruit any type of staff. And so when I read this, one thing that came to mind is, the whole Department of Labor, the equal employment opportunity. So many identities are protected under that. And then it also made me think of the whole affirmative action, would then there be a strategy in place where somebody, which categories would then be favored? I think it's a really important policy, but it'll be interesting to see, because I do think it's a tricky one to bring to life for, what both Steve and Ellen, how far do we want to go with that? How far is the district willing to go to make that happen? And no matter how far you go, to a certain extent, we have some people perceive Vermont to be a homogenous place, but you can take a group of people who look the same and they might define themselves or identify in very different ways. So that one, I really like that has been included, but I feel like it's a very complicated strategy to bring to life. If we can just hire staff that show up to work and they're like good at their job, I've gotten it's just been like, it's so hard to find staff. It's so hard to find staff. I hope we can get beyond that and have like a lot of people to choose from, from diverse identities, just have 10 people applying for one job that are all qualified for every job. That would be nice.
And Joanna.
I would love to see strategy 2 contain something with ongoing professional development. When I link it back to student needs are equitably addressed across the district, right? That's what we're linking. Is that how we're linking it? So something like, I just was looking at another strategic plan, but I like the wording of collaborative and transparent professional development. Because there isn't any, and I looked at success, there's no professional development.
Are you saying strategy 2, Joanna, or strategy 3?
Strategy 2, collect, analyze, and report on resource allocation data and implement ongoing evidence-based professional development for staff that is transparent and collaborative with the community.
Would that be a third, fifth strategy?
Seems like a fifth strategy.
Are we not linking the strategies to the
Which one are you linking it to?
goal 2?
So
But I
you're
guess
saying
we don't
like
have
target
to.
1
We
and
don't
strategy
have another
1
strategy.
and target
Can
2
we
and
just add a
strategy 2.
strategy 5?
Yeah, we definitely can, but I just want to I just don't know if I'm following. Which target are you linking it to?
This is the goal.
She's looking at the target too.
Oh. Now I'm in access still.
Mhm.
Strategy 2.
You're looking at to target 2 specifically?
I'm looking at, target 2, and I thought it was linked to strategy 2.
No.
I think it's linked to strategy
Yeah.
1.
There's no like,
Perfect
No.
numerical
Right.
link.
That's what you're saying with the first one.
No.
Because sometimes there's more
it could-
targets than.
Well, I
Exactly,
realize
and it could be in service of multiple targets.
Yes.
Right.
So
But I
I
do
guess
like
the
what you're
question
saying,
is,
Joanna.
yeah, like, I guess, sorry, point of order, I'm all out of order.
Yes. Very
Sorry,
good.
I'm sorry, Barb. I guess my question would be your suggestion about continuing professional development. How would you propose wording that so that it's in service of goal number 2 or some,
Strategy
or
number
one of,
one.
yeah.
I guess in order to analyze and report on data in a way that's meaningful and equitable, you have to have professional development to understand that. Right? You have to have some sort of lens and training to understand
So-
what you're.
Let me clarify, I think that's a question. Is the professional development in association with the collecting, analyzing, and reporting on the data?
It's how I initially saw it, because I thought I had to fit it in a strategy that's 1 through 4. But if I know that we can just add a strategy 5, then I would like to have something about how we are training our teachers.
Okay, so I'm gonna call on Jamie.
Go for it.
It strikes me as more of a success strategy,
Or a
professional
target?
development,
Target?
Instead of access.
than an access one. I don't know the way
Oh, you mean goal 3 instead of goal 2?
I mean goal 3 instead of goal 2. Like I'm having trouble figuring out how professional, which I was just looking to see if it's down there. I don't think it is, but is it? It just seems like tacking it on to where you're suggesting, Joanna, to me doesn't make sense, but including it does. So like, what is it on there?
Well, proposed target 5 is about attracting and retaining a strong and diverse workforce. And I do think that could be.
I guess I see it as the lens, sorry, no, go ahead.
What are you talking about?
Well, no, we can continue because it was clarifying your
Statement.
Yeah,
Mine's still
To be honest, this seems weird because it's here too.
I'm wondering
Like-
if the training staff that you're talking about is specific to, around collecting, analyzing, and reporting on data. Like you're talking about training, having opportunities for staff to know how to collect, analyze,
Yeah.
data, or is it more general staff development? Like,
I guess I see it like as our families having access to our schools and our education program has a lot with how our teachers are. I guess I can't think of like like it's not responsive. I guess it could be considered like responsive classroom, but
Implementation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so we should we have a
Mary Heather,
Well, did you
or
want,
or
did you want to
Suzanne.
say something?
I didn't see.
I was just gonna say that professional development around analyzing, collecting, analyzing, reporting on data and understanding that data, that would be within the implementation team's piece, that they would ensure that if they have staff that don't understand how to look at the data that they're collecting in their classrooms and using it, then that would be part of the implementation process, is that they would make sure that all staff have that appropriate training. So that's within the implementation part, not us to direct the administration.
I guess I just want to underscore what Suzanne's saying. I think we're starting to slip into between, off that line between what our role is as a board and clearly defining our dream destination versus how we will get there. And the how happens from the implementation team. The implementation team is, of course, whether it's student need or data collection and interpretation, if there is training that needs to happen to ensure that that is done, that's the how. I don't think it's the board's responsibility to specify, we want this ongoing education done. It's kind of implied by our dream destination and how high we've set the goal, that the implementation team has to empower their staff to help us get there.
I guess I'm trying to fit in what is very attractive to me in Burlington's strategic plan that says ongoing improvement around professional development that is collaborative and transparent to the community. And I see that as being a part of the access chapter. Like that's an attractive phrase in another school district strategic plan that I would like to consider weaving it, and I see it more as access and not success because of the collaboration with the community and the transparent piece. But it's just.
Okay, Steve.
I agree with Joanna that there should be some sort of nod to professional development. Would it potentially, Joanna, if we look at success strategy 2, where it says build capacity for culturally responsive practices to bring in voices to help diversify the curriculum, which is, again, faculty development, facilitate difficult and courageous conversations, that's counseling, and put diverse resources into the community, would it be a good place to put your request for staff development in there, or?
Where were you putting it? Sorry, I lost it. with
Goal 3, success.
Oh,
we're jumping
okay.
ahead.
I know, but you were saying, I was trying to address, your concern, and maybe that might be a better place to talk about that. I understand what you're saying, that you think it goes under the access portion. But I was wondering if maybe it would satisfy the idea of what you're doing, put it under the success under that particular.
I think it could, I think it could live under goal 2 because of the fifth target under goal 2, which is attracting and retaining a strong and diverse workforce to ensure consistent student access to high quality instruction. And I think also around comprehensive data collection and reporting. I think that there are a couple of places. I also think it could be a new strategy without overreaching and over prescribing to the implementation team. And Jamie had asked why this fifth strategy or target, is in around a strong and diverse workforce is under access and not success, we did talk about that as a committee. So Mary Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, because you brought up this point, which is that access, actually consistent teachers, strong and consistent teachers is an access issue too, right? When there's high turnover and a volatile or unstable workforce, that creates access problems.
Of it, yeah.
So I like that, and I actually think that if we're thinking of a strong and diverse workforce being a part more rooted in access, not that it's, you know, it's not mutually exclusive to success, but that it lives here, then I would argue that it could, that fifth strategy could live in the same goal.
Thoughts from others? Do we?
I have a request.
Yes.
Jen, can you reread that strategy that you're, it just would, I think, help.
I think I probably have it
yeah,
printed out
No,
too here.
And I hope I'm not overstepping by looking at this, but this is part of the ad hoc committee's process too, is looking at this, because I got it's professional learning, implement coherent professional development structures and systems for ongoing improvement that are collaborative and transparent for the community.
Thank you. It's right there.
Would folks be open to us adding that?
I think,
Yes.
I was gonna say that if you, built it in or reworded either strategy one or, well, any of the strategies under goal 3 success, I think is really where it belongs. I mean, strategy 2 under success talks about culturally responsive practices, bringing in voices to diversify the curriculum. So you're, and so I think that if you're adding professional development, that would be the best place for it. Because you can't do curriculum if you don't have the professional development. So they kind of go hand in hand, I think, but I
That
mean.
is also where it resides in Burlington's plan. It's related to curriculum and deeper learning for students, so.
So at this point, can we kind of put that on the parking lot right now? And then when we go through the strategy for goal 3, let's examine that again? Is that okay? Okay. Anything else on the strategies under goal 2? Okay, Jason, you can take it from here.
All right, so the next goal is goal 3, success. We took the first 2 goals that Nicole and Courtney and their team, I don't know, sorry, Emily, if you were in that discussion too, the administration developed, and we pulled them out into targets 1 and 2, and then we added targets 3 through 5. Questions, concerns? In this case, we specifically called out the VT-CAP assessment because that is our benchmark proficiency assessment that is used statewide. So it seemed appropriate to get that specific.
Joanna.
95, do we know what the 4-year cohort high school graduation rate is now?
89,
No.
86.
86. 86, she said with confidence.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Suzanne. We need a flag so I can see over the heads.
So a couple of, I don't know, wonderings. So in this state, GEDs are not recognized as high school diplomas. So we do have a lot of students, well, a good amount of students that will leave the high school to complete their GED, but not their high school diploma. So I wonder about that. And for some students, it's just because they're just so done with school. A GED is 4 tests. If they can make it through the 4 tests, they've got a document that they can go to work with, and most workforces either require a GED or a high school diploma. So I wonder about that. And then the other one that I wonder about is number 5, where it says all graduating students are enrolled in post-secondary school or training or unemployed, or are employed. What about those students that choose to take a year and discover themselves? They don't fit any of those categories, but they're learning about who they are and figuring out what they want to do with life. So are we saying that they shouldn't do that? I mean, I would hate to corner us in a bucket or corner our students into a bucket. So those are some of my questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna call on Chip next. and
Yeah,
then
I had the same question on that one. You know, one of our problems, because we're not fundraising like colleges or other things are, once alumni are gone, they're gone. And we have no way to really track their issues. I mean, they can be going to college, but they may drop out after the first semester. And we don't have any data as a school system to sort of track that kind of way. So this, to me, is a difficult one to quantify or set a goal as, because we don't have the data, especially if you'd say, well, a person traveled the world for a year and then went to college. We just don't have any way to document it. So it's a goal. Certainly we all want that, but I'm not sure this should be in here, honestly.
Ellen.
I wonder, and this would be a question for maybe Nicole or for you, not to put you on the spot, but I wonder if we could modify number 5 to say all graduating students are enrolled or are ready for post-secondary school or training or to be employed. So that you've got kids are kind of ready for those things and or they are immediately commencing into them.
Right, we've prepared them.
Right. And the point isn't that we're measuring ourselves by their completion or their long-term
That would
employment.
dissatisfy me
It's more
because
of their
it's more
ability,
measurable.
right? What can we control? We had a lot of conversations like this around mental health too, right? That we don't want it to be like, there are limits to what can be controlled and addressed in the schools, but within those limits, can we be doing the best possible job? Does that pass muster, Nicole?
So, Steve, you had your hand up before, and then I'm calling Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to anecdotally, having 2 sons that took a year. One who became a rocket scientist, literally, he works on satellites for Northrop Grumman. After he took this year of what we thought was one aimless wandering, not all who wander are lost, as Tolkien says. And a second son who said, I want to take a gap year like Eric did. And we said, there's gap years and there's gap years. And so that means 2 of my 3 children were not successful by this rubric number 5. And I, again, I go, because I taught in the school system where it was like, the most important thing you can do is go to college, and I hope we're past that. But this, again, seems like a step back towards that. Because to say that an 18-year-old knows what they're doing is kind of problematic.
Jamie.
I'm just wondering if it was put in for a reason. Like if there's a problem that our students are not college ready or employment ready, or that this has been identified.
I think it speaks to so if we hit the 95% graduation, but kids weren't, but you want to make sure that it's not just sort of graduating for graduation's sake or
Right.
or an equivalency degree for the sake of meeting that, but that you're also attaching some expectation about preparedness for multiple pathways into adulthood that sets someone up for success, basically. I think it's more of like let's not just hit a certain rate and say that we're done. Let's also hold ourselves accountable to the quality of the education that they're getting and the training. That was also lifted from the Burlington plan, which.
This was?
Yeah.
And it also ties it back to our mission and our vision, which is all about creating, capable and contributing citizens. So it isn't just about graduation or college. It's about, being adults who are capable of contributing to our society and whatever community they're living in. So it does kind of tie back to that.
Right. And go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah, well, Mary Heather was expected to speak to exactly what I was thinking is that really what we're preparing is to be prepared to be engaged citizens, not necessarily prepared for these specific ways of engaging.
Yep. So maybe it's a wording thing, for the actual target itself, that we need to work on. Joanna, you had your hand up?
No.
Okay, Suzanne.
So the only thing I want to go back to is the graduation rates, because in this state, so some of our students do leave the school to attain a GED. This state is not like the state of Florida, where if you attain your GED, they automatically hand you a diploma. You have a GED, which is its general education equivalent. But also in this state, if you get a GED, you may at any point in your life walk back into the doors of MUHS and say, hey, I never graduated. I want to get my high school diploma. And you can ask for a seat and sit in the classroom and take your high school classes. So I just wonder about that graduation rate and realizing that we do have some students that for them, that high school diploma right now just doesn't mean anything. They just want to get done, and the way they see it is a GED, and I don't want to close a door to someone that says, I don't want that piece of paper right now, I just want my GED. So I just want that to be acknowledged or realized. There's nothing, it's not saying that there's anything wrong with the education that's at the high school. For them, it's just the four walls just aren't working, so they're just doing what's right for them at that point in time.
So, Tricia.
Well, and I'll just kind of throw in my 2 cents that I don't feel like target number 5 is a good reflection on preparing our students to make positive contributions to the community and beyond. So I think just my 2 cents into this debate is I don't feel like that target aligns with that stated goal. So whether it's reworked or if we need to have that in there, I don't know. But as it stands, I don't think it's quite right.
Okay. I'm going to do Lindsay and then Joanna.
Yeah, along this tangent with 5, we want our students to have a path. And when I think about, the post-secondary school training and our employed, it's interesting because we make these lists with like 8 different things in them, and this particular list is so short. For whatever path a person is on, whether it be a gap year or, working 3 jobs or, helping take care of their younger siblings at home or whatever, are we going to invest the same amount of time in each student? One of the things that seems to be like that, we're trying to move away from this post-secondary school focus. So if somebody's trying to get into an Ivy League school, is that person going to get the same amount of encouragement to find their path as somebody who is trying to figure out how they're going to be, helping to support their family and take care, how do you get an apartment when you're only, 18 years old? I would love to see a commitment to helping our students find their path, whatever it needs to be at that point in time. So if part of 5 is about just like investing and helping them find their path, I'm all for that. And it seems like that's what that is. But I do think it's really narrow. And I'd never even really thought about what Suzanne brings to light. But I'm wondering, as a district, are we able to kind of fine tune the definition when we say graduation rates? Is there a way to change the way we're wording this so that we are giving those students who are getting a GED credit for finding that, taking that step on their path? Because people don't have to do that. How can we bring more respect to the GED? I mean, is there any way of, I don't know if it's something that's set by like the DOE or like, is mandated that, a graduation rate that can only include, a high school diploma. I didn't realize what you're talking about, like other states where you get a GED, you automatically get your diploma. But if we have the power to do that, could it result in a positive outcome where students who drop out without getting their GED are more supported to get the GED? Is there a way for us to try to promote that positive social change so that it's more inclusive? I don't know. But have you investigated that, Suzanne? Is that something that's like alive in the world of politics?
I think this would be a state mandate.
So the graduation rate is determined by the AOE.
Yeah.
And so it's number of students that
Mhm.
graduate in a typical 4-year. So you start as a freshman, and if you graduate in 4 years, you get a graduation rate. Those students that drop out are dinged against the graduation rate, but if they eventually come back and complete their high school diploma, then there's points added back into the school system. So it's the AOE piece. The GED piece is within state statute. But GEDs do not count towards graduation rate because in the eyes of the state, they have not completed a high school diploma.
So we'd have to use a different metric if
Yeah.
we wanted to include those individuals, okay?
I think I'm skipping Joanna. So
Oh,
I just
I'm sorry.
I had
I'm sorry.
suggestions on this that I wanted to throw out, but we can work. I'm just thinking of if we want to try to revise a little bit in real time, but.
Well, I just wanted to add that, like, we're not really talking about completely hypothetical things, like Steve brought up his kids, and we just like completely described my child who graduated with GED a year early and has stayed home for the last 2 years and is now an adult to help me raise all my other kids and kind of be an adult in the household. And I think that is a huge success, and we're not kind of identifying that here. Because he is a graduated, prepared adult to help him grow.
And Joanna.
Yeah, I just, so underneath, so Burlington also had high school students report that they are provided with the experiences that are challenging, engaging, and empowering. And I really like the word empowering. So and when we are talking about all graduating students, we're talking about that 95%, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I would like to say all high school students are empowered to pursue the next step. I mean, you had suggestions on how to rework it, but I really like the word empowered by their learning.
I was actually going to try to link it directly to our vision, to what Mary Heather said. So I was just thinking all graduating students, or maybe all high school students, are empowered, or I had written are prepared. Truly, this is just our language, to prepare to become adults who enrich our community and the communities where they live in the future. It's really open-ended, but then if you look at goal 3, strategy 3, maybe Lindsay, this speaks to what you were saying, provide multiple pathways. We just added for K-12 students. So meaning just all kids, not just high school students, that are equally dynamic and celebrated to assure student success. So again, if we want the target to be kind of open, to speak more to we're not trying to prescribe a certain definition of what kids should be doing when they leave high school so much as we want them to be prepared for a successful, healthy life.
Yeah, have choices, yeah.
And then I think strategy 3 kind of gets to the specifics of the multiple pathways. And then to what you were saying, Suzanne, I was wondering if we could try to wordsmith a little bit on, goal 3, target 3, where we have high school graduation rates or equivalency degrees or equivalency to, is there a way of adding some language that allows for students who are not graduating but are receiving their GEDs?
I'm just curious, I guess I would look to Nicole and Courtney, maybe a little bit about how that's handled or described and how we might incorporate that additional measure, I guess.
In terms of the language for number 5, special education law actually has a pretty robust definition that's already implemented across the country for transition. Promotes movement from school to post-school activities, post-secondary education, vocational training, integrated employment, continuing in adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. So
pretty great.
Yeah, they really
That works.
tried to name all the things.
We could do better than that.
And we're currently using that for a portion of our students, so I'm curious
So if
about
we
that.
modified number 5 to encompass that, and then I'm just also wondering both of your thoughts on the question surrounding GED and how, if we were to modify number 3, is it clear, I guess, if we said something like what Ellen suggested, high school graduation rates or equivalent degrees, does that meet what our dream vision? And does it articulate well to be include all the students in the pathways?
Is it okay if I
Go- yes,
give one
please.
piece of information? In 2009, I think the state of Vermont set a goal of 2020 for 100% of students for all schools to have 100% success at graduation rate. And they recently increased it to 2025 as a goal because we're not there yet. And as Suzanne already articulated, the state does not include GEDs in that data. So there's already a state goal that was recently updated around this, just as a piece of information.
And they added?
Did they add
They
GEDs?
extended,
No,
no.
they didn't
And
extend.
they extended the goal to 2025.
So from a state perspective, they're trying to get everybody with a high school diploma, not a GED.
Is that like in the 4-year cohort too?
Yeah.
Because I know of many kids actually that chose to take 5 years because they were like really engaged in a Hanford Career Center program and wanted to have more time to do their 4 years and do an extra year. Judging it on this 4-year thing.
Not a simple thing, right? It's difficult.
Should we maybe, we hadn't talked about this procedurally, but I wonder if this is one where the committee could kind of bounce ideas around to come up with a proposal to bring back in the next draft for the full board that reflects when it sounds like we want to include something that is more expansive to recognize students who receive their GEDs and not just high school graduation rate. So maybe we can practice out some wordsmithing on that.
We could do that. We hadn't talked about kind of next steps, having the committee meet, but when we're done with the presentation, we can talk about that.
I'd just jump in and add something about the GED. I don't know a ton of kids who got their GED, but I do know a few, and in a lot of those cases, the district, sort of didn't meet their needs for goal 1 or goal 2, right? They felt like they didn't belong or they did not have access. And so I think it's obviously not the case for everybody who goes the path of the GED, but I think it's something to consider that some kids that get GEDs are, you know, have been let down a bit by our district. So.
Thank you, Jason. And are their pathways adequate, right? So that would be, first of, you know, my question is, do we know why? You know, we're not making it to begin with, right? You gotta understand the data and the reasons why our graduation rate is at 86. And from an implementation team, they would have to look at that.
Do you have any idea how 86 compares to?
We looked at a couple.
We looked at like,
It's higher than Vermont's, but it's
yeah,
not the highest.
it's higher, but not the highest for sure. What did you say? Champlain Valley was higher.
And it is not
It was in the 90s.
as high as we've been in the past.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, maybe what we need to do is just really hone in on upgrading and expanding target number 5 to be more inclusive in our description. Because again, I mean, we're trying to really describe, you know, our destination and where we want to land. And I guess a little bit, I feel compelled a little bit by Jason's point that hopefully we would have kids elect to stay in and earn their degree if they felt their needs being met and didn't take the, you know, a different route and leave with the GED. I don't necessarily, I don't mean any judgment upon that. I just think that, you know, there are probably students who have been let down and perhaps could be captured and be a part of this vision, I guess.
We did say 95%, not 100. Some flexibility.
Something about that.
Okay. More on the targets here. It's something like, and we'll talk about this later, that possibly 3 and 5 is something that the committee really should meet again and take under consideration and see if we can, after listening to everyone's input, that, you know, good input, reword them, be more inclusive. Anything else on the proposed targets under goal 3 for success before we move on? Joanna?
Just had a quick question about chronic absenteeism and dropout rate. Do we know where we are now with that? It says it's gonna be reduced by 50%. I'm just really curious where.
We know that.
We can pull it up really easily. Do I have it memorized? No. Maybe.
I would just add, the high school is holding monthly meetings on the topic of the graduation rate, where they're scrutinizing absentee data, data about kids who are in school but not in class, comparing it to their local grades, to their test grades, to the graduation rate over time. So it's work that they've set it as their goal and they're really looking at it. I couldn't rattle off absentee numbers, but they are charting them on a monthly basis and comparing their practices at school this year to their practices in the past and trying to find trends.
Yeah.
I think it's proving harder than I expected to just identify trends with COVID in the middle of tenure deaths.
And I just would hope that absenteeism is it's all of the grade, that we're looking at that data, the chronic, yeah. And but I can understand why the high school.
Suzanne.
Oh, Suzanne, I'm sorry.
So 2 things. One, the dropout rate is where the students that leave to do their GED or to take a totally different path and go the apprenticeship program. That's where you'll find them, unfortunately, because even though they are pursuing their education in a manner that works for them, they're considered dropouts, which I really, really hate that term. And I wish we could come up with a different vocabulary, but that is the term that's used. And then the other thing is a point of order is, we still have another half hour's worth of work, and we haven't finished this yet, so.
Anything else under the proposed targets before we move forward? Okay, Jason.
The last section is goal 3 strategies. And we already sort of discussed this one. Strategy 3, we reworded to provide multiple pathways for K through 12 students in our district.
And here previously, when we were talking under, for goal 2, we talked about potentially adding a strategy here.
For professional development.
For the professional development.
You already folded into strategy 2.
Thoughts on that?
I support adding it. I see what you're saying, Steve, but that would make it so cumbersome. I almost feel like rather than have a really long 2-sentence strategy, maybe just
Add a fourth one.
Yep.
Or could we, sorry, I'm the person sitting down here at the end. Could we reword strategy 2 to incorporate everything?
Capacity and provide professional development for culturally responsive practices.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I feel like strategy 2 is important enough, which is really focusing on culturally responsive practices, diversifying the curriculum. Like that's really focusing on the equity portion of this. And I think that is important enough to have stand on its own. Kind of like Mary Heather was saying, that's that checking your blind spot thing again. I think it is worthwhile to have a 4th strategy that's specifically on professional development in a more generalized manner.
Other thoughts, reactions?
I basically agree.
Of all the above.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like the committee will have more to do. I don't know. And so I think one thing we could do is task them with coming up with something about professional development, put it somewhere. And to me, as I said before, it does come under the success, like here would be the right place for it. I know Joanna was saying somewhere else, but I feel like, well, do we have to come up with it exactly right now?
We have what Joanna suggested it's this basically.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
she was claiming it should go somewhere else. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we don't have to come up with it on the fly here.
I personally don't see a problem with adding another strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
It's in service of the goal.
Yeah.
Okay, so the committee will take that under advisement and work on that. Anything else before we move on to the next slide? Hey, Jason.
So the next slide was about structural changes to the document itself, and one of the main ones being to pull out the action steps that have been part of the strategic plan and have them live on their own in a separate section of the document with the description that they are not part of the board's purview and were really just suggested action steps for the implementation team to consider. We felt it was really important given the process that was undertaken and the time spent and the diverse voices that were pulled into the action team and all of their work that we really felt strongly about preserving that and having that as part of the strategic document, but recognizing that many of the specifics in those suggested action steps are beyond the purview of what the school board should take on. The other things in there were just to sort of reorganize stuff, put strategies in under the planning targets and goals, and sort of has a natural hierarchy. I know as we've been discussing this, people are saying like, oh, does it go under this goal or that goal? And in our discussions as a committee, it became very clear that a lot of these things are very much overlapping, and that if you address and take one strategy in one area, you're going to influence student success in another, right? So I guess I just would say that so we don't get too hung up on exactly which bucket things go in. They all definitely work together. The other pieces we want to do is to expand on through the executive summary section to talk about exactly what the strategic plan is addressing, and then also to provide more context, maybe in the form of appendices where we talk about the advisory committee report and also our equity survey. So, those are the major document changes. Questions about those?
Okay, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm confused how the action steps, I don't understand now the relationship of the action steps to everything else. Like they are sort of now called suggested action steps. And before, I just don't know what happened. And so what is the relationship between them and the strategies and the targets?
So they would still be associated with strategy, right? Like they were before. It's just we're taking the document and dividing the responsibility of the board and what we would approve with the work of the action team.
Implementation.
And that the implementation team would then take, that the action team did.
So the implementation, the action steps belong more to the purview of the implementation team?
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
But they're not required.
No.
They're suggestions from the community. So the document will memorialize that a lot of work went into community members identifying what they saw as action steps that would speak to achieving goals and strategies.
Yeah.
And so the implementation team and everyone will be able to see, like, this is what that team of people thought could be ways of getting to these goals. But we've now added and changed the document in a way that the implementation team is going to have to figure out the action steps that they will adopt, some of which might come from those suggested action steps and some of which won't, that meet the targets and the strategies as we are adopting them. So it's recognizing the work that was done and the suggestions from an important group of people. And also it's not something that the board is saying, and this is what you should do to get there, because the implementation team is going to ultimately have to identify what they see as the path to getting to the targets and the strategies and the goals that we've identified and that we've laid out in the document. That's why we talked a lot about, once it came up in the committee that these were suggested action steps and not definitive or, like Jason said, mandated, sort of changed everything in thinking about, like, oh, well, then these can live as, again, sort of a recognition and documenting what the suggestions were, but not necessarily us as a board deciding these are the actions we're all signing on to take. Does that make sense?
Okay. I don't know how you determined they were suggestions.
We were told. Nicole and Emily explained that to us.
Oh.
Okay, Mary, Heather, and then Lindsay.
Well, the other thing, I think it's just important, and it's an important way for us to, as a board, in the way we're structuring our strategic plan, clearly defining the role of the board in the strategic planning
Right.
process versus the administration. It's the district's strategic plan. The board is the component of the district that sets the high level, this is where we want to go. The administration is taking us there and determining how we'll get there. The action steps that were previously provided are kind of the community's, here's how we think
Great.
that, how we should get there. And some of those things may be included ultimately in what the implementation team puts together. And they ought to look at them because that's what our community has asked for.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what will happen or what is financially possible or even feasible from a professional standpoint. I think the important thing is for the board to signal that this is not what the board is directing its administration to do.
Okay.
And that's kind of what's, I think, seems to be allowing us to move forward as a group.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Oh, good.
Lindsay.
So about the document structure, I think it's a great idea to clarify like whose role, who has which role. I'm just looking at, we have the goal, and then beneath that we have the targets, and then beneath that we have priorities / objectives / strategies, and then next is the action steps. So are there, when it says suggested action steps, are there already many of those in draft, or is that all to be determined through action and implementation team?
That's what was in
They're
the
all the old
original.
ones.
The old ones, but
Yeah.
there's nothing in here.
No,
No, because we didn't.
They haven't changed.
We didn't go into that other than to suggest that we restructure the document
Okay,
and title it suggested action steps as opposed to what it was.
okay, so going back to the draft,
Yes.
okay. And I think there are probably many ways of visually making this clear. As far as readability goes, it could make it harder to understand if we break it into two sections specifically and have to redefine like if we had goal with targets and priorities and then flip 5 pages forward and we have the same goal with action steps. Like just looking at this, I'm tired, but just looking at this, like I have to keep scrolling back and forth, like, wait, goal 1, belonging, goal 2, I have to keep going back and forth like as it is with just the 3, goal, target, priority. So if we add another one, if there's a way to have like, this is the story, for this, this goal 1, and it could be that the background is a different color or a different font is used, or the goal, target, priority is on a 2-page spread and then the action steps are on the next page, or like each of the goals are a different color or something like that. But if we create like 3 goals and then flip forward and then there's another 3 goals with action steps, one of the things we wanted was, this to be readable, so it's more accessible for a greater percentage of our constituents.
And it won't look like this, Lindsay.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But yes, that's a good point, like the format needs to be, yes.
Please don't literally divide it into 2, because then there's a lot of flipping back and forth, I think, more flipping back and forth. So,
But we do want to separate, we do really want actually to divide it, because separating out the action steps means that they're identified as suggestions and that they're not part of what the board, to what Mary Heather was saying, that the board is taking action on the goals and the strategies and the targets, and then that there are suggested action steps but I think that they will be separated, but probably not in a way that's as confusing as it sounds like it. I think it's
Okay.
gonna be a visual experience to
Okay.
understand more than a verbal one, but yeah.
It's important though that, we, before we print, 500 color copies of this, I think it's important to, run it by a ninth grader and like, can you read this? Like, run it by, are we gonna have to translate this into a bunch of languages? Like, run it, run it by, a family who, English isn't their first language, but they're learning it or whatever, I don't know.
Yep.
But don't just run it by us before we print all those color copies of it, and say, yes, this is what we're voting on. If we could, I was looking at the timeline, and I hope that there will be, this is our final draft. This is the one that we're gonna print. If there's a way to run that by some different eyeballs that aren't so like, so deep into the process for readability,
Joanna.
I would just hope that the addition of the suggested word to this was communicated to the action team. I just don't want that to come as a surprise. It's not gonna be a surprise to the action team. I don't want that to, take away from the work that they did. Is there a way to communicate that
We
that's
certainly can communicate
Okay,
that, yeah.
that would be great. Before
Thank
it
you.
gets seen.
And just to be clear, I mean, I would presume that during the process, it was not conveyed necessarily to the action team that what they were suggesting was definitely, absolutely going to happen. Is that?
I don't think we ever conveyed that what was in it is definitely absolutely gonna
Yeah.
happen. I do think
People
in
were
full
encouraged to be,
transparency, everyone had different versions of what the end would look like. And that's continuing to reshape itself here.
I think it's worth noting too that many of the action steps in there have already been implemented or are being implemented by the district currently.
Other comments, thoughts on the document structure? Okay. Next steps. So I think I need a new one. So what needs to happen is that we reconvene the ad hoc team and a committee and make some modifications as we discussed in this particular meeting. And then we can do the review and ratify the report of the board. And modify document. At this point, what I think is important is that we are setting a point when we can then have Emily start to make the changes. What I don't want to see happen is her making changes and then we, yeah, and that kind of thing. So, and that was kind of the intent of was to wait until we ratified it. And it's looking though that we'll need to review our input again on the 27th. The suggestions, our report, and hopefully be in a position to be able to ratify those, accept the report at that point. Does that make sense? Which then we need to give time for Emily to make those changes in the document. But I think we're moving in a good direction. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right time to ask this or not, but like, when does the strategic, let's say in 2 months or a month, we get a strategic plan, we vote on it, we like it. When does it start?
The implementation?
I guess, like, when do we say,
As soon as we approve it.
Then it's up to the implementation team to
It
take
goes to
it
the
from there
superintendent.
and come up with a plan, right?
Yeah.
It's like, right, and then
They're just waiting
they'll
for us.
identify what they can do when.
And this is a 5-year plan, right?
Correct.
so we would, okay.
Yeah, so there's obviously a little bit of work to be done.
So, I mean, just to be clear, because I'm sensing your question, you're wondering
Okay,
whether or
thank you.
not the implementation team develops their action steps and brings it back to the board for its approval. Is that what you're asking?
I guess I'm actually really wondering if we start the new strategic plan, like, force or whatever you want to call it, now or when we get a new superintendent.
I think this is a larger discussion, but I
Yeah.
will preview and say, I think it would be really problematic to bring in a new superintendent if a strategic plan has been fully, like an implementation team that's led by the superintendent, who we don't have a permanent person in that position yet. So, but I think that should be a discussion, because we are in process of hiring someone who would in theory be leading the implementation team.
And there's a lot of work to be done here, independent of that,
Yeah.
that people need to get started on. So we definitely wouldn't want work not to happen on this, definitely not. And just the fact that we approved the strategic plan, it's not done. I mean, now there's, the heavy lift has got to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I guess, a random comment, but it just keeps cycling in my head. This is a 5-year plan. My oldest is in 9th grade, my middle child's in 7th grade. So when we're talking about graduation rates and our hopes for in 5 years from now, you know, we're talking about my kids' graduation classes. Like, so by the time Reed is graduating high school, 95% of his class will have completed high school in 4 years and be getting their diploma as they walk across the stage. That's there's a long path from here to there.
Mhm.
Mary Heather.
I will just say that I think that our board has taken its sweet time in moving along in this process, and that our continued delay is problematic. And once we get it to the administration, and obviously right now we have an interim in place, and there's a team in place, and that team can start working on identifying, okay, how do we prioritize, and, you know, what's our best way to get there, and what are the tools we need to do, and what kind of assessments do we need to gather to get our current state. There's a lot of work that can be done, and so the idea of delaying this any further literally makes me nauseous. I feel like we, as a board, need to demonstrate that we are doing our job, and doing our job means finishing this task before us.
I will fully support that because we can't, I mean, we would just be sitting on our hands and waiting. We can't wait. This is work that we told the community that we're working on, that we're moving forward with. And to just say, well, we don't have a current superintendent, so we're just gonna sit and wait again. Just sounds like we're just putting it off and not wanting to really be serious about it. So there's plenty of work. There's a whole implementation plan, and there's giving us some data on that implementation plan. There's plenty of stuff that can be started and moved forward with.
So,
Point of order, can we possibly
yes.
keep to the agenda? and keep
yes,
moving?
I would like to refocus us. This is a discussion that we can continue to have, but let's get the strategic plan in a place that we can actually approve it. So let's focus on that at this point.
Do you need to make any sort of motion
No.
giving the ad
No.
hoc more? Okay, great.
And first of all, I would like to thank everyone here for your comments and your input. And it was, you know, very valuable. We met 3 times, and being able to get the input from all of you just makes it even better. So hopefully this helped in, moving this forward. For folks too that are sitting here, the work that the ad hoc committee did in preparation for the meeting to get us as far as we have. Okay. So next on the agenda, and I know we're late, just wanted to give a few updates on the superintendent search update process. There were some schedule changes. You'll see that Heather has put in the schedule that the interview sessions for the board will start at 6:30. Dinner starts at 5:30 now instead of 5. So dinner is here, but what you're gonna see in the agenda that gets set up is when the official meeting itself starts, right? So just to be mindful of that.
Dinner is here?
No, so
Okay.
per the request, we're not using this room anymore because this is really office space. And also, per the request of the board, last time we met, it's not as good as the Hannaford Career Center. So we've moved the board's meeting to the Hannaford Career Center. That's where the dinner will be served. So that's where we'll be, is in A208. And food will, and the candidate, their spouse, if significant other, will be there possibly. And so that first period will be dinner. There'll be a window of time for our food services folks to clean up before we start at 6:30 for the actual meeting.
But everything's there.
Everything's there. Everything's there.
I thought Thursday
All
we
four
were-
nights?
All 3 nights. For the 4th night, we've still are entertaining this space, which we can do because it starts later and no one's here. And I hadn't included dinner for that 4th night.
Okay.
Right. Okay, and so there was some modifications made to the schedule that kind of pushed us a little bit later that evening.
16th.
And the 16th, the time for that will start, and I gotta find it, sorry. I think I said it in the email, it starts at 6 o'clock, I believe.
Yes.
Yes,
6.
6 o'clock,
And there's no dinner then.
and there's no dinner. And at this point, stakeholder groups are underway as far as forming the membership. Nicole has stepped in when Tim was gone for a lot of the stakeholder groups. There is a survey out allowing people to sign up for the parent. And at this point, I have pretty much 4 community leaders committed. It's been hard getting somebody to be able to do all 3. And I'm waiting to hear back from the Parent-Child Center to see if they could join. So there might actually be 5. Okay. So that's all I'm gonna share unless somebody has questions.
I have one question.
Yes.
And we may determine this right before, but last time we assigned questions. Are we planning to do that? Do you know, or does Judy just have a?
She's putting it on a form. Let me take that as a question back.
Okay.
Good, yeah. Because it was much easier to have just assigned questions.
Just let her how she does it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so what I'd like to do now is open it up for public comment on any topic. I moved this ahead of the executive session so that we can pack up and not have to come back, so Jim can pack up. So is there anyone that would like to offer a public comment on any topic in the room or on Zoom? Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, Mary Slozar from Waybridge. I wanted to follow up on 3 points that I heard tonight in your discussion about the strategic plan. One point just to add to what Suzanne brought up about the graduation rates and the GED issue. It's also a federal right of students with IEPs to stay in school longer if they need to. So just consider that and as you're discussing that. And then just following your lead in that 100% versus all, maybe it would be agreeable to just say improve the graduation rate instead of say, like, we all agree it should be higher than 86, but maybe it doesn't need to be 95. That's just a suggestion as you think about that. I wanted to follow up also on the issue around hiring staff with diverse identities and retaining them. It just stood out to me that I only heard board members reference this in relation to race. And that is extremely, I don't know, doesn't seem to see the big picture here. We've got other identities, LGBTQ, we've got neurodiverse identities, we've got people of all different abilities, and I hope that that is included in the board and implementation team's thinking. And then finally, I just hear, when I hear the board speak about family engagement, I can't help but I feel I need to point out that it doesn't seem like most of the people in this room understand what is meant by family engagement, at least at the federal level, as it is described in ESSA. Yeah, there's one thing that's what it is, and another thing is how to do it. So reducing barriers, things like that, that's a how. What it is power sharing with your community. So it's kind of modeled off of what parents' roles are in IEP meetings. They're not there to just be informed about what school's doing. They're there to be part of the decision-making process. And that at its base is what family engagement really is about, as opposed to parent involvement. So I just want to highlight that. I'm not trying to call you guys out. I just think it's so important and it's constantly missed in these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, what we're going to do is move into an executive session, but we're going to let Jim pack up. Oh, Suzanne?
I make a motion to move into executive session, personnel, board member performance, one BSA for 13th grade. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you.
Or were you saying executive session?
Yeah, oh, thank you.
I'll take care of it.